Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky, Lord, I lift your name on high.
A man once had a beautiful garden. It was his pride and joy. He spent all of his time feeding plants and weeding plants, planting and protecting. And then one day, a neighbor child, in all of his joy and enthusiasm, ran through the garden, oblivious to the damage he was doing, uprooting plants, trampling down flowers. And you can imagine how the man felt. I mean, the natural instincts arose, and he was angry at the child for being clueless, and angry at the parents for letting him roam wild, unsupervised. And he had harsh words come to mind. But then he remembered the teachings of Jesus and of his apostles, and he chose to forgive. That's a big moment for all of us. When we've been wronged, it's a moment of decision, and he chose to forgive. He went back and he replanted what had been disturbed, and he continued to nurture it, and it became even more vibrant. But not only that, he not only rescued his garden, but he protected relationships that could have been damaged forever. I think we learn from that how that we ourselves need to remember our own youth or our own sins, and we need to choose to forgive, just like it says in Colossians 3 and in verse 13. It says, if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. If anyone has a complaint, it means that you may be justified. You've got a gripe. You've got a grievance. Somebody has wronged you, offended you, a complaint against another. It tells us that we need to choose to forgive. It's up to you. I mean, you were wronged, and you could respond harshly, or you could respond kindly. The word for forgiving means to pardon. It means to give graciously. It means the other person doesn't deserve the kind treatment that they're giving. They haven't earned it, but it's what you choose to do, to release them from their debt, to release them from the penalty, to release them from resentment, so that peace and harmony can be restored. That's the most important garden of all. Well, it's the garden of your heart and the garden of our relationships with others, that environment that we create. So important. But notice here, this is obligatory. That's what he says. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive others. As the Lord. You know, when you go over to the book of Romans in the 5th chapter, Paul tells us in verse 6, for while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, even though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And so we look at the forgiveness of Jesus. In our weakness and in our sinfulness, without deserving his mercy, he makes that choice. He chooses to forgive us. And that meant going to the cross. He chooses to forgive us. And when we look at how he forgave, that's the standard. It was graciously. He forgives completely, not with any lingering grudge. He does it gladly. And he does it continuously. Not once, not even 7 times, but 77 and beyond. And so we see that this is the responsibility that rests upon us. It is obligatory. In fact, in the book of James, we're told in James chapter 2 and in verse 13, for judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. Triumphs. And that's what we want. Victory in Jesus, following his example. And that means this is serious. It's a sobering requirement. In fact, it's so serious that Jesus, in Matthew chapter 18, gives a parable warning us about the dangers of being unforgiving. It's the parable of the unforgiving servant. And you remember that parable. You have a man who has a debt. He's called to account by his master. And there is no excuse. And so he pleads for time. He pleads for time. And the master, knowing he could never repay the debt, not in 2 lifetimes or 10 lifetimes, chooses to release him. That's what the text says. He forgives him and releases him from the debt. It is a beautiful picture of mercy. But the man, outdone, leaves his master and starts looking for those who owe him something. And when he finds one, he seizes him, not by the collar, it says he takes him by the throat. And he says, pay me what you owe. Well, in an eerily reminiscent series of events, the man implores him, pleads with him, give me some time and I'll pay. But he doesn't. And so he throws him into jail until he has paid the full amount. Well, some of the fellow servants of the man who was forgiven saw what happened, and they were shocked and deeply distressed. And they went and reported it to the master. And the master summoned him at once. And when he summoned him, he said, listen, I showed you mercy. You ought to have shown this man mercy. And the fact is, the master was angry because of what had taken place. It says that when he did this, he was turned over now to the jailer because he had to now pay the full amount, where he could have just received grace and shown grace to others. I love the conclusion of this, even though it is, again, a very serious and sobering warning. But it says, so also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from the heart, genuinely, sincerely, that this is going to bless you. This will bless him. This will glorify God. This is how we live as Christians. And what it means is that you better get pretty good at forgiving. If your judgment and your destiny depends on this, how wonderful that we have this warning, and how beautiful the memory of our forgiveness by Jesus that implores us to extend mercy to others. If we're going to live a Christ-like life, we must forgive completely, graciously, continuously, aggressively. Love forgiveness. Choose forgiveness. I hope you enjoy your discussion tonight. God bless.
You came from heaven to earth to show the way. From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky, Lord, I lift your name on high.